Powerful, disturbing, or magical, the atmosphere of the Royal Saltworks at Arc-et-Senans is without doubt unusual and never leaves anyone entering its premises unmoved. Designed by the celebrated Parisian architect Claude Nicolas Ledoux, who was imbued with the Rousseau-inspired philosophy of the Enlightenment, the Royal Saltworks today bears unique witness to the industrial architecture of the 18th century. The Gatehouse is the entrance to the site. This monumental entrance was the only access to the mine for the 250 workers and craftsmen who worked there. The sober and powerful architectural approach to the complex is emphasized by the peristyle and its 8 baseless Doric columns that support the entablature. The Gatehouse, comprising a deep portico supported by heavily banded Tuscan columns and placed against a background of rusticated rockwork, gives some insight into Ladoux's forceful style. The front projection of the pavilion consists of a portico and porch imitating a grotto, symbolic of the harmony between the human spirit and nature. Sculpted high reliefs from which sprout crystallized brine adorn the wall near the gatehouse. The buildings that have survived to the present day were designed to be the first stage in Ladoux's ambitious project to design an ideal city that would reflect his Enlightenment beliefs. Construction took place between 1774 and 1779, but was then halted. In line with the gatehouse, the director's residence is taller than the other buildings and is the symbol of both spiritual and temporal power. The portico, consisting of rare boost-type Doric columns, alternating square and cylindrical drums, is surmounted by a triangular pediment pierced by an oculus, symbolizing knowledge and surveillance. The oculus recalls the idea of the panopticon of Jeremy Bentham, and other contemporary theories of organization and of official surveillance. The clever arrangement of the geometric volumes, the treatment of the stone, and the alternation of dressed courses are part of the lively play with light and shadow that emphasizes the powerful reliefs of the entire building. The dominant effect of the Pyramidal Pavilion is accentuated by the belvedere, which raises the height of the roof. A private entrance in the perimeter wall allowed the authorities at the Royal Saltworks to enter the management building, shielded from the public gaze, via a second doorway in the rear facade. Inside, the imposing staircase in the center of the building was once used as a chapel, while the altar built into the back wall dominated the staircase with 3 landings that were used as a nave. The first floor was reserved for the suites of the Famille Générale, a sort of tax collector, while the servants' bedrooms were on the top floor. A restoration program initiated at the end of the 1980s made it possible to install offices and exhibition rooms, which now house a permanent collection dedicated to Ledoux, entitled In Pursuit of the Ideal City. In the cellars, Le Lieu du Sel, where the salt was stored, is a museum space presenting the salt-related activities at Arc-et-Senans and in the Franche-Comté region. Behind the director's residence, the stables and coach house were used to house animals. The design of this small building is in no way inferior to the noble buildings, and repeats similar features from the director's residence, including the oculus on the pediment and the rusticated columns, though on a smaller scale. The clerks' houses, known as the commis and the gabelle, are two identical symmetrical buildings with a square ground plan, situated on the east and west ends of the diameter of the saltworks. Because of their position, the main facades of these buildings faced the sides of the salt factories. Each building consisted of 4 levels and was surrounded by a courtyard and gardens. The excise clerk's building was originally used by fiscal administrative officers handling the salt tax. All salt leaving the factory was subject to controls by the officials responsible for preventing tax evasion. On each side of the director's residence were the 2 barns, or salt factories, which were the manufacturing heart of the Royal Salt Works. They were rectangular in plan, measuring 81 meters by 28 meters. In each building, the brine was evaporated in 4 vats hanging from crossbeams and positioned above furnaces laden with wood from the forest of Chaux. About 15,000 steers or cubic meters of wood were consumed each year. Evaporation was carried out according to a tried and tested procedure, requiring a carefully calculated heating time and delicate handling, making for a strenuous and exhausting ordeal for the workers. Each of the buildings comprised a central section with a triple opening. The pediment of the portico was lit by 2 windows and formed the living quarters of the person responsible for supervising the brine. The saltworks in Salins-les-Bains and Arc-et-Senans demonstrate outstanding universal value in terms of the extent of the chronological time frame during which salt was extracted at the mines. The interiors of the West Burn have been restored to reflect their original appearance. The solution adopted depends on the same structural principles used in Gothic cathedrals, such as piles counter-buttressed by abutment pillars inside the walls, forming the facades, and parabolic arches for the high areas, which maintain the ensemble and neutralize thrust. The large nave of the East Burn today contains multi-purpose rooms intended for cultural activities, exhibitions, and concerts. The saltworks produced 40,000 quintals of salt per year at its peak, all of which was exported to Switzerland. The ground floor of the central part of the blacksmith's building contained 3 forges, 2 of which are still in place today, including the original anvils and other necessary tools. There was a kitchen on the first floor, and 6 bedrooms were arranged in each of the wings. This building has now been turned into a restaurant for groups taking part in meetings and seminars. The Ledoux Museum, dedicated to the work of the visionary architect who designed the saltworks, was established in the former Cooper's building. The museum is divided into 3 sections. The west wing presenting Ladoux's work prior to the French Revolution. The first floor, home to various models of Paris toll houses designed by Ledoux. And the east wing with utopian projects and ideas that the architect was never able to realize. These projects reflect Ladoux's philosophy that favored arranging buildings according to a rational geometry and a hierarchical relation between the parts of the project. The Ledoux Museum has been installed under the superb original roof timbers of the building. It presents a career in the work of the celebrated 18th century architect through engravings, design drawings, as well as 57 models based on Ladoux's drawings. This visionary architect remained gloriously impervious to material constraints and reflected many of the philosophical ideas of the Age of Enlightenment. Ledoux was 37 years old when he was entrusted with the job of building the Royal Saltworks, though he had in fact designed the Saltworks before receiving the commission to build them. The site was inspired by the ideal towns of the Renaissance and designed as a theater. Ledoux published his writing, Architecture Considered with Respect to Art, Customs, and Legislation, which contains his own engaging account of his work, real and imaginary. The work was intended to be both his memoirs and his testament. The large plots of land between the wall and the buildings of the hemicycle were set aside for the workers' kitchen gardens. As the workers lived on the premises, the produce of the gardens complemented the provisions brought in from the outside. Franche-Comté had developed intensive salt production and trading as far back as the Roman era, as many archaeological remains attest. Like Lorraine, this area was ideal for the production of salt due to its proximity to rock salt deposits in the Jura Mountains, and the subterranean water network that runs down from them. Built over underground saltwater springs, the saltworks at Senans were close to forests that provided an abundance of the wood that was necessary to fuel the production of salt. Like all other royal factories, the saltworks were hemmed in by a curtain wall which was reinforced by a ditch on the outside. The Franche-Comté region is a land studded with cultural riches, which are what give it its special soul. Though left unfinished, this plant created to produce salt, which at the time was of fundamental economic importance, was classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982.